I'm going to show you how you can populate the food truck template with your graphics. We'll be working with masking. Now if we look at the layers in the file, and this is the file that you were given in your project package, it's the .ai file. In the layers, each portion of the truck, front, back, left, and right, has been given its own designated layer. So that makes things a little easier and keeps things organized for us. Now, what you're going to want to do, of course, is have a rough idea of how you want your truck to look, but you may not entirely know exactly where things are going to go. By now you've developed the name of your business, color palette. You have enough graphic elements that are going to allow you to design the food truck itself. So what I did was I added a new layer, and I'll show you how you can do that here. You'll be adding that new layer in the layers panel, and it's the icon right down here beside the trash can, create new layer. So you can do that, and of course drag and drop your layers, so you can drag a layer right up to the top there. You'll want to do that, put it right to the top. So I had already done that. I'm just going to delete this specific layer and turn on the one that I did earlier. Now you're going to see here's some of the graphic work that I've been doing for this truck. Now, on this particular one, I chose to create Dots Ice Cream. And I have my logo, a version of it. Now keep in mind, whenever you're doing a logo, you should be ready to have a vertical version, one that's more tall than it is wide, we'll say, and then a horizontal version. And we talked about that in our logo projects in the past. Now in this case, I brought in my graphic elements. They're all again on that layer. And what I did prior to this point was lay out the graphics on each portion of the truck in a way that I thought worked best. You need to play around with this a bit, of course, because you're working around aspects of the truck that can get in the way of your graphics. If I just assumed that I could put this down and it would look great and nothing would interfere, that would be a bad idea on my part, because this being especially a food truck, it's got the window that opens up, so this portion of the truck would likely fold right up and open up to the serving area. We have windows, bumpers, and so on. A lot of these things, when you're doing vehicle wraps, you simply have to be aware of and very much design around. Even lights. You don't want your graphics to land where they're going to be on top of the lights. Now, of course, they can be trimmed out, but sometimes when you're having those trimmed out, you could be missing a portion of your graphic that you would rather keep. So this does become quite strategic. So I played around with this a bit. Obviously, I didn't spend too much time on it. I could have spent several hours on it and made a really nice design. But I just wanted to get something together that could give you an idea of how to work with a template like this. Now, a couple things you'll want to include, of course, the logo, some graphics. You'll probably want your website address on the side of the truck, even your social icons. You maybe get those on here. There's a fine line between littering the truck with graphics and having the ones that are necessary in terms of branding and promotion. You know, this is a vehicle that goes down the road, so there is a lot of promotional value in that. So having your website address and your social icons on it is, of course, advantageous. So I got these laid out, and I liked where they were placed. It seemed like it would work out. One thing that you'll want to keep in mind here, when you're doing vehicle graphics, you want to try not to box things in. I'll show you what I mean by that. In this case, I put these graphics here, and they're not framed in by the perimeter of the truck. You can see they overlap a bit. Now, if I did the graphics and I wanted them, right in to the perimeter like that, and nothing was going out, exceeding or going outside of the perimeter of the truck, what that does is it really does make it feel kind of boxy. It doesn't feel as open, even in a way as approachable. So what I've done is exceeded those edges. That's where the masking comes in. As a mock-up, we don't want to just have these graphics hanging over the edges and almost looking like an error in the graphics. We want to mask them in. We want to get this looking exactly how this truck would look if it was on the road. So that's just a little tip when you're doing graphics, and it's something to watch for when you see vehicles out there that have wraps on them. Mostly they kind of bleed off of the edges of the vehicle. That just makes a little bit of a more dynamic graphic on the vehicle itself. Okay, so looking at the art again, what I've done is placed it. I've gotten it to a point where I think it's going to work. I want things to be placed. And then I grouped everything together. So I used my design components, my brand components, laid out the design, got it placed exactly how I wanted it, on the side, on the front, on the back. And then one thing to consider, the fact that the truck has, of course, two sides, and the side is typically the dominant graphic on the vehicle. You need to consider how you want to do it on both sides. There's a couple options that we have in that regard. Now this truck is a little different because both sides aren't the same, specifically in the door area. You can see on the right side of the truck here, there's a secondary window down below, and on the left side there isn't. So that changes things a bit, but what you're trying to do is have graphic consistency on the entire vehicle. So some decisions need to be made in that regard. What I did here was simply copy this side's graphic down to this side, and I chose not to do sort of a mirror reflection of it. And what I mean by that is, if I wanted to mirror the graphics, you'll see in this area, the logo, the word mark, is at the back. Well, I would have arranged this in such a way so that this word mark was at the back of this side. And it was just the nature of the way this logo and graphic was laid out that to do that would have been a little more complicated and actually added some inconsistencies that I didn't want. So again, that's strictly a decision you need to make. You need to assess your graphic and think, okay, can we just kind of do the same layout on each side, or should we be mirroring it and revising the graphic accordingly? Now, obviously, when it's a graphic that's not words, we can quite literally mirror it. We can take the existing graphic and transform and reflect and just kind of flip it and put it into place, right? However, in this case, we're working with words. So we don't really want the words to be backwards. What I could do, of course, is reset the type. I do the mirror, reset the type, and do it in such a way that it's going to be, it'll work in this direction. But the nature of these words, again, and even the period being part of the graphic, I just didn't want to do that. So again, that's a choice that you have to make when you're working on something like this. And you'll see, if you see vehicles out there, you'll see there's always different treatments in that regard. On the front, again, I have the logo, the word mark, I have the web address, and I used the dots aspect of the branding components. So I have that separated over here. And then you can see the back. Now the back, I didn't actually bleed off of the edges. it just didn't seem to be working because of the way the graphic landed. I wanted to maintain the angle that I'm using. The angle on something like this is also another technique used to minimize the boxy feel, because we are essentially putting graphics on a box. If you angle your graphic, that helps it make it feel a little less boxy. But at the same time, on the back here, that didn't allow for me to easily bleed the graphic, because where things started to land, there was just too much interference with all of the vehicle items, the lights and so on. So I left that one contained within the graphic itself, within the truck box itself. Okay, so you get your graphics set. You get them where you want them. You think this is going to look good. You have your color palette and so on set up. So now you need to mask these in. So I'm going to go up here where I've taken these graphics. I'm going to show you a couple of things.